You are now tuning in to the Going North podcast with your host, best-selling author, professional speaker, and member of the John Maxwell team, Dominic Dom Brightman. And every Monday and Thursday, we're going to hear the voice of a different author sharing their gifts, stories, and expertise to help you charge forward in life. Now let's get on with the show. Yeah. Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. It's the host here, Dom. It's one of those rare occasions where I actually talk before the actual interview starts, because the guy likes to get straight down to business, give you the content, and let you go about your business. But today is a little different because this is just a little prequel to today's episode since it's a special case. I had a great interview with the following author, V.S. Holmes. She was a fabulous lady. I have to give her some credit because she was one heck of a trooper, because my mic actually died about 20 minutes into this episode. So since that happened, I basically said screw it and kept going with my laptop mic, and that didn't work out so well, so I had to add in some bits and pieces and cut out a few things. But nonetheless, it's done, and I'm just glad that you are a subscriber. I'm glad that you set aside some time to listen to this episode. So for those who love this show, thank you so much for all your support, especially my man, Mr. Tony Garrison. Appreciate you, man. Mr. Unpaid Staff Tony, as we call him sometimes, from way back when. But I appreciate you and the rest of the fans. Just wanted to shout him out in particular. Hope you're doing well during this virus, everybody. Hope you're doing great. Hope you're staying healthy. Hope you're staying prayed up, faithful, and full of faith and hope and inspiration. Now let's get on to this show for real this time. And today on the Going North podcast, where we bring you some fabulous humans from across the globe. Today's no different, but it's a little different. It's a little different because another fellow lover of the color blue, the wonderful Mickey of Creative Edge Publishing, has linked up with the Going North podcast to bring you some more fabulous authors from across the globe, baby, across the magical globe. No apologies to the flat earthers out there. So today we have a fabulous author, and this is the special guest right here because this is the first ever sci-fi author we've had since episode, I believe, 33 with Beth Martin back in 2018. So the 2-year drought is over, because this time this sci-fi author is a best-selling author who has multiple books. And not only is a best-selling author, they also won the New Apple's Literary Award of Excellence of Independent Publishing back in 2015, and has gained so much more prowess and is sharpening their sword. That not only that, this fabulous human right here is also working on all sorts of other things, is also an archaeologist as well. So that's also first for this podcast, a sci-fi author who's also an archaeologist. So let's welcome the one, the only V.S. Holmes to the show. How you feeling today?
I'm feeling pretty good. Thanks so much for having me. This is fun.
Oh yeah, fun on the bun indeed. The beautiful thing is, this ain't your first rodeo, so I'm sure that you're ready for all the nonsense that awaits. I already used the tree joke pre-recording, so.
Like I said, we're some pretty easygoing people up here.
Woohoo! That's right. It's so easy going that introductions are usually modest. So mind filling in some cavities where missing fillings and tell us about what makes you the wonderful V.S. Holmes.
Well, I'm a sci-fi fantasy author, and my day job is as an archaeologist, and I find that writing and archaeology are very, very much the same thing. You're just kind of searching for the story there. But yeah, I started my writing career with the Reforged series, which is epic fantasy. And I actually just finished the final book in that series like 2 weeks ago, and it still doesn't feel real to me. I mean, I'm sure when the editor sends me back the manuscript that's like torn apart, it'll feel very real. Too real. And yeah, then I also have my sci-fi series, which is the Nell Bentley books. And that I sort of dove a little bit more into my archaeology background because that's lesbian archaeologists in space. So yeah, that's sort of me in a small nutshell.
Oh yeah, we'll go with the Brazil nut. Those are usually bigger nuts. That's right.
I like walnuts myself, but that's fine. We can compromise.
There we go, a giant walnut.
They look
That
like
brick.
brains, all right? It's cool.
You know what? That is so darn true. Walnuts look like brains, and they don't have to be on the wall either.
No.
Well, that's freaking fabulous. My goodness. So, what led you to become an archaeologist?
Well, I kind of fell into it. It's every time I tell this story, someone always says, it sounds like the beginning to the like one of the Uncharted video games. Um,
Nice.
I wish my life was that exciting. There's far less treasure hunting, but just as much injuries and being broke. But the story sort of starts with I was on a ferry going to my grandmother's funeral, and this was years ago. And this middle-aged man was sharing the table with me on the ferry, and he was reading one of those like college newspapers. And I saw on the front page this article for this archaeological site in Crete, and it was supposedly the oldest archaeological site in Crete. It was like 175,000 years old. And my degree is in biology, and I sort of was specializing in human evolution. And I was just fascinated by this. And so I said, sir, do you mind when you're done with that, if I can read that article? It looks very interesting. And he looked up and he's like, well, actually, that's my site. And we started talking, and he found out what my focus was in. And it turned out that he was actually going to my grandmother's funeral too, to represent his family. And his mom had been her best friend. And it's the 2 hour ferry ride. So we got to talking, and by the end he said, well, we need volunteers, and if you can get yourself there, you can dig. And that summer I was on Crete, and thankfully for my wallet, it was during their economic collapse in Greece. So it was pretty affordable, and I have never looked back. Digging in the dirt gets under your skin in a way that I think a lot of jobs don't. And it just spoke to the storyteller in me. And yeah, never looked back. I'm one of the very, very lucky people who absolutely adores their job.
Sweet. That's what I'm
Yep.
talking about. That's what I'm talking about, indeed. Wow. So, really just digging up bones and all sorts of other objects from a magical ferry ride. My goodness. And I bet that wasn't even on your radar at all.
No, I mean, I knew about archaeology, and I loved Indiana Jones and all that, but I didn't realize it was like something you could just go do. And after that, I started digging around in other places, and yeah, it was something that like every kid is like, oh, I want to be an astronaut, oh, I want to be an archaeologist, I want to be a paleontologist. And yeah, it wasn't something that I thought like I could do without like starting from a very young age.
Ah, fabulous right there. And you're able to dig for so much. Actually, what's probably the most interesting thing you found in your travel so far with digging?
Well, I was doing a dig for one of my field schools. We had like a rescue archaeology thing that happened. Someone was putting in a septic tank, and it was on this incredibly old site in the White Mountains. And so we had like 4 days to go in and take out as many artifacts as we could to save them from this septic tank. um, and I found a stone knife that we were able to excavate. I did it with rubber gloves, so my hands didn't touch it. And we tested the knife edge of it, and it came back positive for bear DNA. So it was used to skin a bear. And that was just really cool. Just like, so that was definitely one of them. I've found a few burials that were really moving. I found some pendants that were really cool. But honestly, most of the time, it's just miles of empty holes. Kind of like writing. Is this a good
Well,
idea? Nope. Is this a good idea? Nope.
well, the good thing you didn't pick up that knife with your bare hands. Oh.
Well, apparently someone had.
That's right indeed. That's right indeed. That was right up there, a good old knife right there to slay the bear.
Mhm.
Skin that bear alive for trying to take the porridge back. That's right.
And the stone was yellow in color, so Goldilocks. We can work something out there too.
Oh man. Yes indeed. Goldilocks indeed. She locked the rocks. That's right. She had them rocks on lock. Maybe not Dwayne, no.
Right.
So your love of writing. So was that before or during the archaeology?
I mean, definitely during, but very much before. My mom worked in publishing. She worked as an editor for a regional magazine, and she's very literary. She's not a huge fan of the sci-fi fantasy stuff, but um, her love of reading definitely translated into me. And my dad was always a storyteller. He had some wild tales that he always told me, and between the two of them was sort of like, well, maybe I could tell a story. And it started out with like the little kid stuff. I wrote a series of stories about my stuffed bear, Heidi, the adventures of Heidi Bear. Um, though that did not become any sort of bestseller. I did find it earlier today when we were going through some old things, but
Sweet.
yeah, between that and just I just always wanted to tell stories. I was an only child, so I had to have an imagination, otherwise I wouldn't have friends. So
Oh, yes, indeed. Nothing wrong with some imagination. That's right. The strongest nation ever. Imagination. And of course, donations, the second strongest nation ever.
right, and then followed by procrastination, I believe.
Yeah, that's a China-sized nation. My God.
One of the great world powers.
Yeah, yeah. My God, imagine if we. Funny enough, that might be a crazy sci-fi novel, or like an anti-productivity, anti-self-help sci-fi novel. It's like, yeah, we're taking on this giant nation,
Anti
procrastinate.
self. If we succeed in that, my problems might be solved.
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. Well, the beautiful thing is that you're able to take all that imagination and creativity and inspiration to become a sci-fi author.
Hmm. The
Yes, and
rocky road.
a pun. I love it.
Yes. I always get teased because no one thinks, I'm funnier than I think I am. And I'm usually the first and last person to be laughing at my jokes. I'm terrible at telling jokes. But I definitely I try and own I have a really terrible sense of humor, and it's okay. You don't have to think I'm funny because I think I'm funny for the both of us.
All righty. Somebody's got an extra check mark in my book for positivity. All right, good. That's what I'm talking about. Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. I think we found another hidden kernel in the corny joke kingdom. I love it. Woohoo! Well, fabulous indeed. Fabulous indeed. So you got this fabulous series, the Nell Bentley series.
Mhm.
So far, I believe it's a trilogy. Is there going to be a fourth book?
Yes, I just started drafting it. Well, blueprinting it, outlining it, whatever. There's going to be a total of 6, and the next one is coming out in fall of this year, actually, and it's called Heretics. And I'll definitely have some spin-off novels with some of the side characters because I can't let this world go yet. Um, that's how it always works out for me. the first book, Travelers, actually started as a standalone, and I was maybe 2/3 the way through it. I'm like, oh, so like here's books, 1, 2, 3, 4, and yeah, I can't not write a series.
Yes, indeed. So, what keeps your imagination going? Because fiction's a different world from nonfiction. Because nonfiction's like, hey, you put a blog together, you're already okay. Fiction, it's like you got to make sure like all the characters and everything makes sense. So, what keeps you going and your imagination flowing to produce so much?
Well, I mean, part of the nice thing about my day job is there's a lot of people watching. We have some like ridiculous coworkers. Like they're just caricatures of actual human beings. And also, we're alone a lot of the time. We're out there, and it's just sometimes it's just you by yourself, but other times it's you and a dig partner. And some people are pretty chatty, but the good pit partners, they'll have these long lapses of just silence, and you're out there and you're in the woods, or you're on the power line corridors, or wherever you are in the cornfields, and there's nothing but your own mind, which is a little daunting for some people, I think. But I'm able to just roll over all of these, like, so what if, and I just keep nudging ideas until something clicks, and then I move on to the next one. And that's sort of how Nell Bentley started. Was we were working on a site, and I do contract archaeology, which means like we're on the pipelines, we're on the power lines, and any road work that has to be done, we go in first. And so we end up in some sticky situations sometimes politically, and there's landowners waving guns, or there's whatever. And I thought, like, well, what would happen if there's this archaeologist, she finally has this like awesome site she's really pumped to work on, and the first day that she gets there to run this field school with her best friend, she finds out that it's vandalized. And so then that was the first what if, and then I just went from there. And she's a Nell is like, she hates sci-fi. She's a really like skeptic, pragmatic person, and she really doesn't like it when her site starts to look a little more fiction in the sci-fi aspect.
Sweet. A lot of what ifs.
Yeah, a lot of what ifs.
Heck, that actually reminds me of like one, like even like phone conversation, even lunch table conversations with my buddies, like this whole what if moments.
Mm-hmm.
And the sad part is, one guy, my buddy named John, like that, there would always be three evil endings. It's like no matter what happens, it's like I always get beat up, end up in a cornfield, or for some strange reason.
We always like the would you rather's in the field, because usually there's like a question of the day, and then as you pass each other, you're sort of thinking about the answers, and it's always, well, would you rather? And by the end of the day, when the dehydration sets in, oh boy.
So do y'all just like pass out if once you run out of the water, or just take a pause, or does the really snarkiness kick in?
I mean, all of the above. There's definitely some times when it's like we're you know pressed for time or something. Everyone will start getting really loopy, and then you'll hear the crew chief over, like, through the trees or from the next field over, like, everyone drink water. Like, you're being ridiculous. Um, but it's and usually the injuries start rocketing too. But you know I've only seen a guy machete himself once. It's
Oh,
fine.
okay.
Yeah, he's fine now. It's good.
Okay. All right.
He's actually like one of my best friend's boyfriends, and that was funny. Like, we were all different places in the woods, and we get the group text. So what's the protocol for taking someone to the ER when they've macheted themselves? It's like, go, just go. Drive quickly. I don't. So
How the heck did that even happen?
it was a machete with a brush hook on the other side, and there was a springy tree. The the blade came back and the brush hook part of it bit into his shoulder blade.
Ew.
Yep.
Ouch. All right. Well, he said
Yep.
he's okay. Thank God.
Oh yeah. I mean, he's incredibly accident prone, so I assume he's okay, but that's that's not what took him out if he's not. So.
Okay. All righty. So if you got Butterfingers, try to avoid archaeology. I got you.
Yes.
That's right. The fingers stay greased up. Yes,
Mhm.
indeed. They stay greased up indeed. Well, that's fabulous right there. Lots of stories to tell and share with the rest of the world indeed. And sticking with the worlds and having that focus. So what's probably, in addition to the people watching and just your past experiences, is there anything else that really contributes to your love of a certain world and keeping focused on that?
There's definitely an element of escapism in some ways. I think a lot of my stories start out that way, and then they end up getting like way too real. I'm a big fan of brooding characters and angst and angry characters, and I like imperfect characters. I like writing actual human um, people and human personalities and flawed characters. And I don't like my villains or my heroes really to be, pure good or pure evil. I like this gray area, and I also try and focus on characters whose stories we don't hear as much. I like to incorporate various marginalized characters. I'm a queer person and I have a disability, so I try and write characters that look like me, at least in some way, um, or feel like me. And once I like it took me a few books to realize like, oh, I can actually do that. Because you don't see it as much. You sort of don't realize you can do it. And yeah, that's just revisiting these worlds that are sometimes worse and sometimes better than ours. I think is just what keeps me coming back. I want to know who these people are.
Whole power of being able to write your story. Heck, even creating yourself in that story as the hero or a supporting character that gets a lot of love from the fans.
Yeah, when my dad first read the Nell Bentley books, he was like, "She's really angry. Like, why is she pissed off all the time?" And I'm like, "Well, that's the thing she got from me, Dad." And by the way, I got my temper from him, so it was very rich of him to be saying that. Yeah, I think it's sort of fun to explore. Like, I mean, obviously there's that element of like, oh, these people can do the things I can't, but there's also sort of like, okay, what would I do if I were in this situation? And that's another one of those what ifs, right? And I don't know. I just like untangling like what makes people tick, and that there's no higher stakes than like alien invasions and wars between gods and the creatures that created them. And I don't know. That's sort of what I like to pick apart.
Ah, yes, indeed. So, what's been the biggest lesson you've learned thus far with writing and publishing your work?
Hmm. Biggest lessons. I think there's a lot of pressure, to write a lot and write quickly. And I think I had to learn, that wasn't my pace and that wasn't how I wrote. And there's writing advice that'll tell you one thing, and then there'll be writing advice that tells you the complete opposite. And I think just finding out what kernel of whatever is in the heart of my story. Once I find that out, it's like just you'll take it at your own pace. And so like not rushing stuff. And also I love this quote from Dolly Parton, which is find out who you are and then do it on purpose. I sort of leaning into the weirdness of my writing and the weirdness of my worlds. That's something that I sort of had to learn to embrace, because I think especially if you don't see a lot of stories about people like you told, you sort of aren't sure like is this okay for me to do, and just kind of owning it is definitely one of the most valuable lessons I've learned, for sure. That, and you know, take your time, you'll get it done.
So true right there, especially since you're going the self-publishing route and don't have to adhere to a publisher's deadline.
Hmm. Right, right, exactly. And I mean, so many people are able to manage these like rapid releases, and that's awesome for them. But the way I write, and just how, I guess, how I tell a story, just happens to take longer for me. And realizing that like my fans will still be there even if I take a year or two to to get the next book in the series out, and at least with my fantasy books, which honestly take the longest because they tend to be longer. At least with that, I haven't, George R. R. Martin anyone yet. The series is done. The pre-order is up. I did get one angry review from someone who's like, well, the next book isn't out yet. 2 stars, and it's like, well, if you didn't like it, why are you so concerned that the next one isn't out yet? Just wait a minute. So,
Yeah, that's definitely petty. Like, really?
right. Like if you didn't like the writing, that's cool. Nothing's for everyone. But like, you seem conflicted, sir. There's always some wild ones, though.
But hey, it's a sign that you're doing something positive, right?
Mention creating your own niche.
Yeah, yeah. That's definitely an awesome thing. Is finding your niche, finding your audience, even if they're tiny. You're awesome diehard fans.
Wait, this ain't your first rodeo, so is there a question that you wish you'd be asked more often as a guest on this magical podcast? I hope that asked you enough.
Oh, that's a good one. Um, well, a question that I always ask my interviewees is whether or not they have a favorite character, and I think that would be a fun one to answer. Because while I love my main characters, my favorite characters are very rarely my main characters.
Oh wow, okay.
Yeah. Maybe it's like I'm sick of them. Like I've spent way too much time with them. They're like family, right? That you love, but sometimes you just need some space. I think it's also like I with my side characters, I don't plot out their arcs in the same way, or sometimes at all if they're a much smaller character, and I'm always delighted when they surprise me. And I'm not one of those authors who's like, oh, my characters are talking to me. Like that's just sort of not how I think of it. I talk to myself all the time, but my characters don't talk to me. And I just think there's more room for surprises. When you're letting their personality come through just sort of creatively in a way that like I don't have this huge spreadsheet of who they're going to be like I do with my main characters. It's a crazy amount of work, but it's I don't know. I find it fun, right? We always joke because obviously we don't dig during the winter because the ground is frozen. But I mean, we could, and there've been times where the pickaxes come out, but usually we don't. So we get our temporary unemployment because no one wants to hire anyone for like the 5 months of winter because why would you do that? And so it's not temporary unemployment, it's fun employment.
Fun employment.
Unemployment, yep. So
Oh, yeah, that's what I'm talking about. I found another kernel in the Corny Joe Kingdom. Excellent. This is excellent. That's what I'm talking about. So we're coming down to the question that every guest gets to answer at least once during the show, during their first visit. And that is, if you were to wake up tomorrow and you were 25 again, but this time in the current year of 2020, with all of your mass knowledge and experience, what advice would you give to yourself?
just jump. Um, it's actually, I think something that I had to figure out when I was that age was like to just do it. Just jump. Just like fall into whatever opportunities come up. And, don't get so bogged down in the preoccupation of like, oh well, like I need a career. I need to to do this thing or do that thing. I have to have like this normal little life. Normal's overrated. So, I'd say just jump into whatever. And I think I did figure that out, but I think it would have been helpful if I was just shaken maybe by the shoulders and told it maybe a little sooner.
Call that sage advice right there. Normal is overrated.
Yeah, for sure.
It is so overrated. For those who want to get you copies of your roller coaster magic, all your sci-fi magical things, what's the best way for folks to reach out to you?
Well, they can check out my website, which is vsholmes.com, and that's Holmes as in Sherlock. And they can check out my work. There's actually, you can download a little prequel to the Nell Bentley series for free there if you'd like. And my books are available on Amazon and everywhere else where ebooks are sold. And also, if you're more a paperback person, you can order them from your local bookstore, which should be awesome. Support local businesses. And yeah, I'm on Facebook. I'm on Twitter. I'm on Instagram. Twitter, it's my most honest, and Instagram, you'll definitely be seeing pictures of bones and bugs as much as books. So that's your warning.
Any parting words for the folks still listening?
I hope that you'll check out my work and definitely reach out. I love hearing from people. I love learning from people. And if you want to hear a little bit more background stuff, you can check out the podcast that I run, which is the Amphibian Press Podcast. And yeah, I can't wait to hear from people.
How's it going, you super special, awesome human? Since you made it to the end of this episode, it looks like you really enjoyed yourself. Since you enjoyed this episode, be sure to share it with at least 3 people in your network and tell them what you really liked about this episode.